כן, אני רציתי, I want to say something very important. You see, Baruch Hashem, we have 5 children. And from these 5 children, Baruch Hashem, I have 22 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. Wow. Now the point is, all the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren are descendants of survivors of the Holocaust. Wow. Because my children, the boys and the girls, married with families who had very bad experience in the Holocaust.
Wow.
For example, the grandmother of one of my son-in-laws, she is still living, 92. She worked together in Auschwitz with Mengele.
Wow.
With Mengele. And she published a booklet about her experience. I think, well, officially, first of all, they published it in Hebrew, then in Portuguese, because the family was some years in Brasilia. And I think they are working on an English translation. And the grandfather of one of my son-in-laws, he had a very bad experience. He was imprisoned in all kinds of concentration camps from 39 to the very end, including Auschwitz and what was even worse, Mauthausen in Austria. He also survived and passed away in the year of 90 years old or something like this. So what I am talking, and that's amazing from the point of view of my background, all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of mine are survivors, are descendants of survivors of the Holocaust.
That is just unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. No, but it shows.
It's all min hashamayim.
It shows that that in spite of that, the Jewish people, because of their faith, do accept strangers under all circumstances, provided that the strangers are serious. That means they don't hesitate, even somebody who is coming from Germany, you see, to accept him, and finally he becomes a part of the Jewish people.
And can I just ask, Rab, when your children, when they got married and the families, well, they obviously got to know that their father is a descendant of German army officers.
Yeah, they know everything.
How was their feeling? How did they react?
They knew from the very beginning. To see, because there were so many interviews with me and films also and television, so everybody who is living in Israel, he knows whom I am, and everybody knew. And though they had their experiences, there was never any hint concerning my background.
That's amazing.
Never, from all parts. You see, I have 5, 4 are married, and these 4 have very, very bad experience with the Holocaust. But concerning myself,
you were very warmly accepted into all the families.
Yes, amazing, much amazing. But that speaks.
It speaks volumes.
That speaks for the Jewish people, for the Jewish people, that there is no racism or something like that. There might be certain people, but generally speaking, that is very strange to the Jewish spirit.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I think from this personal experience.
And Rav, can I ask, in your journey, have you ever had any negativity from when people hear your background and your father was in the German army and maybe associated with the SS? You've never had any negativity or any negative?
No, on the contrary. When I became accepted, for example, in Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, Rav Tzvi Yehuda told me, listen, you will not only learn with us, you will live here and eat with us.
Wow.
I remember that sentence at the very, very beginning. Because when I came before my marriage, I didn't have a frame. And he said, you will live with us and eat with us, not only learn with us. Well, of course, as I told you, when I was candidate for the rabbinate at the Technion, there were discussions, but finally they decided positively. And then when before I began the course of officer in the army, there were all kinds of rumors also, from a point of view of not from a point of religious, from a point of view, but from a point of view of security. How can you accept somebody from Germany and we don't know exactly about his background to be an officer in the Israeli army? That has to be checked before we do it. I know about that. But then Aluf, Rav Gad Davon, Aluf, he said, what are you talking about? You have to accept him for that course. Aber חוץ מזה, זאת אומרת,
in spite of it, even more so, even more.
Except these two events,
these exceptions.
I don't really remember any negative approach or behavior. And I'm living here in Israel since almost 50 years.
Half a century.
Since 1970, I made Aliyah on the Independence Day by purpose.
Wow, in 1970.
In 1970. Yom HaAtzmaut Tashal, 1970.
But I think
by purpose, of course. As a symbol, it's a symbol, on the Independence Day. So 50 years, so most of my life I'm living here, and there have never been any problems.
Wow.
No. On the contrary.
On the contrary, Rav, you are such an inspiration.
Okay.
You are unique, I think, in this world, and
I wanted to tell you that story. That's amazing.
I think that is the most incredible. Not an irony of history, but that is it speaks volumes. It speaks.
It is a positive expression of the behavior of Judaism, of Jewish people towards the stranger. That's a proof.
But even more so, it's like a defeat of what the Nazis tried to do. Here you're seeing Jewish kinderlach in future generations that are steeped in Judaism, And it's just amazing that on both sides, one was from a side that were perpetrators and one was side that were saved.
Okay.
It's just the most amazing combination.
I think those Jews who know Jewish history, Jewish culture, Jewish thought, they have a good reason to behave like this, because, you know, important Chazal, important rabbis were Gerim.
Sure.
According to the history, even Rabbi Akiva, Shmaya, Avtalion, Onkelos, Ager, and so on.
David HaMelech,
yeah,
his
and
great-grandmother was...
They are part of the frame, you see.
Ruth.
Yeah, sure.
With
Ruth HaMoaviyah,
David HaMelech,
Okay.
and the future Mashiach will come from the house from Ruth.
I think that's the base, and that's the reason for this approach, for this positive approach. Yeah. Okay.
Chodesh Tov.
Nice to meet you. Chodesh Tov.
It's been the most incredible experience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I will give you my book,
Unbelievable.
My mother, her whole life, as far as since we know her, she always plays Pollyanna. She always thinks and looks only at the best part of life. She always sees the full cup
and not the half
of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's blessings. And always when she speaks, now she speaks less because she doesn't have much strength, but always when she speaks, she says, every morning when you wake up, you should start your day saying Modeh Ani Lefanecha, because you don't take it for granted that you are here, and we don't have another land, we have only Medinat Israel, so let's be happy and protect it with our strengths.
And Rabbi, can I just ask, your grandmother, was she as positive as your mom, or was she more traumatized? How did she handle, did she ever speak about her experiences?
My grandmother wasn't as positive as my mother, but she had the strengths, and my mother says she only survived thanks to her mother, because she had always the strength to fight against our odds. And there were certain moments during the war that my mother was already willing to give up, and even she said to her mother that she's going to the wired fence to take her life. That was once, and my grandmother started screaming with her and convinced her not to do it. And once my mother was in the infirmary with Dr. Mengele, she was so weak that she gave up on eating. And my mother tells in the book that my sister wrote that my grandmother, that never said an ugly word and never cursed in her whole life, started to curse her and using all type of very dirty words, just screaming to her to start eating. And my mother said she never heard her mother speak this way, and she was so astonished and so ashamed the way her mother is speaking. That's the way the way that she started eating, and that's the reason she survived.
It's unbelievable.
My grandmother wanted to impress her in the most difficult way, but just to take her out of her depression or whatever.
And you growing up as a second generation Holocaust survivor, did your parents, I know you mentioned they never spoke about it, but you knew from a very young age that your parents were Holocaust survivors?
I think it's transmitted in the DNA. I also grew up in communities that most of the members of the community of the synagogue were also Holocaust survivors. So we knew about it all the time, even though we didn't speak about it at home. I had three rabbis that I studied with. I had more, but I had three Rabbanim Mufakim that I had studied with them. One was Reb Amram Schwartz, The second was Moshe Dresner, and the third was Rosh Yeshiva Telz, Meir Bloch. I didn't know him, but I got to the yeshiva right after he passed away. But I consider him my Rabbi because he was the founder of the Yeshiva when I studied afterwards. At my time, there were already Mordechai Katzer, but Rabbi Rav Gifter and Rav Sorotsky. All three of them, they were in their second wedding in Shidduch Zivug Sheni, because all of them lost 11 children and first wife in the Holocaust. So I don't know where, but it's in my blood, it's my family's blood and so on. And all my children will pass it on to the next generations. How lucky we are that we were born in this generation, in Eretz Yisrael and so on. And we keep it Torah, and we don't have to sacrifice anything to keep Torah.
And I think one of the most incredible things that I've ever witnessed is you have a child that's married to Rabbi Aharon Shear Yashuv. Could you mention a bit about how they met and who Rabbi Aharon Shear Yashuv is?
How they met? They met because they had common friends. Rabbi Aharon Shear Yashuv, it's a most amazing story. Harav professor, Rabbi Aharon Shear Yashuv, his father was a Nazi. He didn't, as far as he knows, his father never killed Jews because he was in the Wehrmacht and not in the SS. And he knew his father very little because his father went to the Russian front and came back only and was in captivity after the war, so he came back at an age when my Chutten was already out of home. But my Mechutten, Rabbi Aharon Shear Yashuv, he went to study theology and philosophy as a Lutheran in Wuppertal. And when he started to learn the scriptures and the Bible, he came to the conclusion that the Christianity is not, it's based on lies, basically. So he started to visit on synagogues and rabbonim, as he writes in his book, and he gave interviews about it. And it's a long story, but in short, he converted to Judaism, and he studied in Merkaz Arav, and he studied in Hari Fischl, and he was ordained as an Orthodox rabbi. And Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cook, he was very close to Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cook, and Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cook married him with his wife, and he was converted in a very Beidin Chashuv. The three Dayanim that were in his conversion were Arav Weinberg, Arav Tzvi Tzitz Eliezer, and Arav Kapach, and I don't remember the third name, but I think it's Cohen. He was one of the Dayanim, Choshev Dayanim, in important Dayanim in Jerusalem. Afterwards, he was invited to be the rabbi of the Technion, and after he was invited, he was invited, but they didn't come back to him for almost a half a year. I didn't know why. Afterwards, when he was appointed, he found out that he was recommended to be the rabbi of the Technion, and they saw his curriculum and they accepted him. But then they found out that he's the son of a Nazi soldier. So they didn't have the courage to invite him till Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cook intervened and spoke to them, said he is the most appropriate person to be the rabbi of the Technion, and he was Rav Technion for many years. He was also the Rav of the Golani Brigade in the army, and they wanted to appoint him the chief rabbi of the Israeli army, but he declined because he rather wanted to go back to the academy, and he studied Jewish philosophy, and he was the head of the Jewish philosophy department of Bar Ilan University till he retired a few years ago.
I think he was there for 30 years.
Yes, he was there for 30 years.
But I think the most important question and the most incredible question is when your son met his daughter and they decided to get married, to think that from your side, you're descendants of Holocaust survivors from Auschwitz, and from the other side are descendants, in a way, of perpetrators. It's the most unbelievable combination.
When we saw that the relationship between my son and my daughter-in-law were getting serious, we naturally tried to find out who are the parents of my today daughter-in-law. But when we met him and we saw what decisions he made in life, we were very proud to get him as a Mechitten. We were very happy, not only with my daughter-in-law, but we were as happy as we are with my daughter-in-law. We are very proud that we are Mechutonim, Dr. Professor Shear Yashuv.
And your mom? Your mom was...
my mom has a very good, very good relationship with all my Mechutonim, but especially with Rav.
שאני יכולה להגיד לדורות הבאים שיש להם מזל שלא בדור שלי נולדו.
My mother says what she can't tell for the next generation. We are all happy that we weren't born in her generation.